today we're going to do a little reenactment of a peace recruiter as opposed to a military recruiter.
What we're talking about is a mortal danger to our children, and that's not an exaggeration. There's a body count that we all know about that I get news of daily because I subscribe to the Department of Defense press releases, and so I'm made aware anytime a soldier, sailor, Marine, or Air Force personnel is killed anywhere in the world, and obviously the hot spots now are Afghanistan and Iraq. But that's not part of the recruiting literature, and they need to hear, these kids need to hear the full story. They get the 4-color brochures with pictures of happy, smiling young people working with each other, and happy to be doing what they're doing, and very patriotic with flags waving. They don't get the picture of the other flags, the ones that are draped around the caskets coming back into Dover Air Force Base from the mortalities that are suffered abroad. Right now, you won't hear from a military recruiter, if you're a high school student, that there are 75,000 plus casualties from this global war on terror just on the American side, pushing 5,000 deaths and about 70,000 injuries, and this is a conservative estimate. That's not what you hear from the recruiters, and simply put, it's not fair that our children don't hear the full story. They need to make an informed decision about things that can affect their lives forever, or even their possibilities of having a life.
So I was just on the Army website, and it was a really great website, and I was really surprised I could make up to $50,000 just right now out of high school joining the Army, and that sounds pretty good.
Mm-hmm. And they've got all the money so that they can make these kinds of claims, and they can come to you and make you these kinds of offers. You have to weigh that against losing your freedoms for the next 8 years, because once you sign on the dotted line and you are in the military, you are not then in possession any longer of your full constitutional rights. You're under the military code of justice, and that is going to punish you by the whim of the officer. A Marine friend of mine spent something like 8 months in the brig for refusing to cut one of his fingernails because he wanted it to pick his guitar, and he was kept a prisoner for that period of time. He didn't have a single civil right during that entire period of time. So you have to be made aware of all of the downsides of signing away your freedoms and of placing yourself in a position where you may be ordered to kill civilians. One young man refused to go back to Iraq. He stayed in my peace house because he was reprimanded for not shooting a mother and her children. They were unarmed. They had failed to slow down coming to a checkpoint. This was early on in the occupation of Iraq. And all of the traffic signs that were put up by the U.S. military at that point were in English. This woman who was driving her children didn't slow down in time, and he didn't shoot them. And so he was reprimanded. He refused to go back. At that point, a person of conscience really doesn't care about $50,000. A person who loses his leg or her leg to an improvised explosive device, or maybe an eye or two, or an arm, $50,000 looks pretty paltry and unimportant and irrelevant at that point.
But they're also offering me, this is a community, and I'm joining not only for the money, but for, family, and to take care of my family here, and to have an education and health benefits, and to protect my country.
And I understand that impulse with regard to going, for example, to Afghanistan immediately after 9/11. The Afghanistan experiment is turning out to be a failure, generally speaking. It's very hard to impose democracy. That's almost I guess I would call it an oxymoron. You can't install democracy at the point of a gun or by first bombing with cruise missiles and other ordnance. This is not the way it works, and in fact, we're giving democracy a bad name globally. Now, you have to really be part of a huge incompetent effort to give democracy a bad name, because democracy, regardless of all of its flaws, still, I think, most of us who live in a democracy would call it kind of similar to what Winston Churchill once said when he said it's the worst form of government except for all the rest. So you really have to, you really have to be doing something pretty negative to give democracy a bad name. And unfortunately, that's exactly what's happening. We're spreading a negative attitude about democracy. And we're doing it both in Iraq and in Afghanistan. There was a priest in Chile who gave testimony as far as living under the regime of Pinochet. And he said, when you have a gun to my head, I'm going to say what I think you want me to say. The minute you take the gun away, I'm going to say what I want. And this is exactly what we are looking at in Iraq and Afghanistan. The minute that we leave, people are going to figure out their own system. So unless we want to occupy and militarily occupy those countries forever, we are faced with that lack of exit strategy. And so we're not making anything safer for anybody back home. We're using what one of my students called the leaf blower dandelion theory of fighting terrorism, where we have all these fully ripe heads of dandelion seeds and we're using a leaf blower, and it's just spreading terrorism. Every time a predator or Reaper drone missile kills another innocent family in Pakistan, that just creates more terrorists because it radicalizes people, as it would if some of your family members have been killed. You would become pretty radical about wanting to do something about that.
But it's very interesting, but actually I don't have any other alternatives. It's either, I haven't had very good grades in school, so it's either, just some job, or it's join the military. What kind of jobs are out there for somebody like me?
It's harder. You're right. It's harder to find alternative ways to either get an education or to work your way up in the work world. But it's not impossible. And I've had experience directly with students over the years, directly with high school students who have come back to me years later because I've done counter-recruiting, 20-some years, and at post-secondary fairs and being almost in direct competition, being in direct competition with the military recruiters. And students have come back to me some years later and said, I am glad that you challenged me to try to find my own financing, other ways to find financing for an education, other ways to try to learn and earn at the same time. Yes, it's hard work. Yes, the military seems like the simple, sign on the dotted line and we'll take care of everything else solution. So if that's all you're looking for, and you're willing to live with all of the other consequences to your soul, to your spirit, and to your body, then the military is going to look more attractive to you. If you're willing to get out and really do the investigative work and really work with people to try to find your own path, there are people who will want to be helping you to do that.